Hello and welcome, Housewives of True Crime YouTube channel. Today I am flying solo without my partner in crime, Gretchy, because if you have or have not listened to our podcast, Housewives of True Crime, you may have heard that I forgot to record for YouTube. So I am redoing the case so that if you only listen or watch on YouTube, you can hear it all here. So I am just going to do it solo to save us time, as both her and I are moms and we don't have a lot of time, probably like you guys, if you also are juggling all these kids and trying to have a spouse and trying to maintain everything else you have in life, work, in-laws, parents, what have you. But if this is your first time watching, we have a true crime podcast called Housewives of True Crime, where we tell true crime stories that are on the lighter side. We hardly ever, if ever, talk about children. So you can go to sleep at night when you listen to us. We like crimes of passion, things that don't deal with a lot of dark stuff. Serial killers every once in a while, but that's a little dark to us too. This week, we are talking about a case that a lot of people already know about. Those who have heard about it, have watched all the things on it. I'm going to apologize right now that maybe you're going to be like, again, I'm going to hear more about this thing. But if you haven't, if you are like Gretchen and I and kind of didn't really watch all the Netflix specials and the HBO documentaries and all that and want to hear how I went down the rabbit hole in the last couple weeks. Actually, I went down the rabbit hole because a listener reached out to us who was texting the person that was convicted for this crime. Yes, actually texting. So I will tell you about her and her text at the end, but it's kind of a funny story because he has some opinions on some other murderers out there. So we're headed to Durham, North Carolina. It's a pretty big city. It's about 285,000 people. It's considered the hippest place in North Carolina to live. And by the looks of it, kind of seems so. I have never been there, but it looks like I would be down for it. It's got lots of restaurants. It's got a good city life. Duke University is there. So, there's good nightlife with a bunch of college kids. It's not the cheapest place to live. Let me tell you, everything is pretty expensive. If you're looking for like a 1-bedroom loft style apartment because you are attending Duke University, you're looking at $1,100 to $1,200 for that. And houses, they run about $1 million, which is pretty expensive in my opinion, but fun nonetheless. Back in 2001, Michael and Kathleen Peterson seemed to be living a pretty decent life. They lived in the suburbs of Durham, and I think they actually had the biggest house at the time. Maybe it's still the biggest house. I'm not really sure. They had a very diverse family. They seemed to be working well. It seemed to be working well for them. You see, Kathleen and Michael were previously married and both came with baggage, as some would call it. Michael with a little bit more baggage, and I'm going to explain. First, I'm going to start with Kathleen, as she has kind of a simpler past. She was previously married and had a daughter by the name of Caitlin with her husband, Frank. Frank and Kathleen divorced, which left Kathleen with just one tiny little bag, if you will. Now we have Michael. Michael also was married before and had 2 sons. However, he also had 2 adopted daughters. Now I'm going to explain his adopted daughters to you, but that's going to take me a little further back. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these 2, Michael and Kathleen, before they met. Let's start with Kathleen. Kathleen was born Kathleen Morris on February 21st, 1953. Kathy, they called her as she grew up, was a real disco biscuit. She played on her tennis team in high school, which is like a dream. I wish I would have picked up a racket sooner, but I waited till like I was 38 to do it, but not Kathy. She was on it. She was on the team. She also was on the debate team. She was the editor of her school magazine. I mean, this girl had it going on. She also attended Duke University after high school, being the first woman to get into the engineering department. I mean, hallelujah, this girl. Kathy decided that she didn't like to be called Kathy anymore. She was too sophisticated for that name, so she was going to be called by her given name, which was Kathleen. She thought it was better suited for herself. So this is when she met her first husband. She was kind of getting, to be a young adult, and she meets her husband, Frank. After graduation, these two married, and she got her master's degree. And then finally in 1982 is when she had her baby, Caitlin Atwater. Kathleen was a career woman. She was strong. She was determined, which you would think would make a great wife, right? Well, Frank, I guess, had wandering eyes, and Kathleen at this time was like, I'm not into it. And according to a book written by Diane Fanning called Written in Blood, Kathleen's husband had an affair. Michael Peterson, we're going on to him. He was born October 23rd, 1943. He also attended Duke University and was a pretty go-getter also. Both him and Kathleen did go to that same college, but they did not go together. Michael is 10 years older than Kathy, so they were not at school at the same time. Michael also wrote for the school paper. He joined the Air Force RTC, and after undergrad, he went to law school. He only stayed a year. He then married his longtime sweetheart, and her name is Patty. He then went to Vietnam on a contractor basis, and then shortly after that, he decided he wanted to go back with the real deal and be a Marine. So he joined the Marines. He went back, and he has kind of this thing with Vietnam. He has this he didn't like how they were portraying it in the media, and because he was seeing the real thing. And after a while, Michael would end up writing all about that. Once he was done with Vietnam and he was still in the military, they stationed him in Japan, and he was in a pretty bad car wreck. In this car wreck, he injured his leg seriously, left him with a limp, and his friend actually perished from the car accident. Then from there, Patty and Mike lived in Germany, and they kind of did this back and forth. They would go from Germany to Durham. His wife, Patty, got a job working on the base as a teacher, and Mike became a writer. Like I said, he wanted to write about Vietnam and his experience there. He did also have a fictional style writing. His books were kind of steamy and a little controversial, and actually he got some pretty good book deals. He made some money off of them. So while in Germany, the Petersons at the time, Patty and Michael, they had some best friends. Their names were George and Liz Ratliff. Well, the Ratliffs were like family to them, okay? I mean, the Ratliffs also were in the military, so you just think, we're both in the military. We don't have any family here, so you guys are like our family. Liz and Patty were best friends. They both taught at school on the military base. And Michael and Patty's boys actually considered Liz an aunt. She was one of the boys' godmothers also. George and Liz had two girls, Margaret and Martha, who were just a few years younger than Patty and Michael's sons. In 1983, George was on a secret mission, duty as you will, for his military position, and he suddenly died. We don't know exactly how sure. I have read all kinds of things. I think on his death certificate, it says unknown, but supposedly he died in his sleep or he died in a secret mission. We just don't know. It was in Panama, and it was unfortunate. He was only 34 years old. So Liz is single mom of two babies. These girls were babies at the time. And so she decides to move next to the Petersons so that they could help her. And they were happy she did. Well, tragedy would strike again to the Ratcliffs' home when in 1985, when actually Liz's kids, I think her oldest was only 18. Oh no, maybe the youngest was 18 months old. Liz also died. Which I'm going to get into more about how she died, but this is when Michael and Patty took over guardianship of Liz's two girls, Margaret and Martha. According to the same book that I had referenced before, Written in Blood, after George's death, Michael helped Liz with her will, and she left the kids to the Petersons, which kind of made sense. I mean, They were living next to them, and they were probably like the only people that these two girls really knew. Her family was in the States, and Michael and Patty were in Germany. Turns out Liz's sister actually did want the girls, but she was back in the States. That's not what the will said. So Patty and Mike took the girls. They also would eventually come back to Durham, and this is where Margaret and Martha would meet a friend in the neighborhood. Her name was Caitlin. That's right, Caitlin Atwater. Kathleen and Caitlin were neighbors to the Petersons. Margaret and Martha, the adopted daughters, were the same age as Caitlin, so they just became fast friends. Patty and Mike at the time seemed to be great friends also, but the love attraction, what you're supposed to have when you're married, well, that wasn't really there. The courtship between Michael and Patty seemed to be more of contract based and less a steamy love affair, if you will. Patty felt like she didn't really sign up for taking on a second family, meaning the girls, and she felt more comfortable in Germany. So she wanted to hightail it back overseas. Michael, on the other hand, met Caitlin's mom, Kathleen, and Kathleen was cute and she was fun. She was driven and she really loved kids. And Michael was like, I am into Kathleen. He was smitten. Patty, on the other hand, was like, peace out. I'm going to take my booty and my kids back to Germany. I'm out of Durham. And Michael was like, I think he was probably on both ends of the rope, right? He was like, I should probably go back to Germany with my wife, but I really do enjoy this lady, Kathleen. So he did take all 4 kids back to Germany for a hot minute, but something was pulling him back to the States, which was Kathleen. So he divorced, or he left Patty at the time. And Patty was like, you'll take the girls with you because that's what you signed up for. I did not, like I said, want to have another family. So Patty kept the boys in Germany and Michael brought the 2 girls and they moved in with Kathleen. Thankfully, Michael had some money saved up from his books and he bought a real big house eventually for the 3 girls plus Kathleen plus himself to live in. They bought a 10,000 square foot home in just outside of Durham in one of the suburbs. Now, by all accounts, Michael and Kathleen had a marriage made in heaven, which I would say for your second marriage, you probably should, right? I mean, if you messed up the first time, let's get the second time right. And seems like they did. Right from the mouths of their kids and all their friends and their family, these 2 were made for each other. They had fun. They didn't fight. They knew each other like the back of their hands, and they liked each other. Kathleen enjoyed having a big family since she just had Caitlin. So when the girls moved in, she just loved it. She worked super hard at her job and she worked hard to have a very good household. Kathleen was one of those ladies that, or one of those moms, I want everybody home 5 o'clock for dinner, and dinner was on the table. I don't know how you do it. I am barely ordering DoorDash by not even 5 o'clock, you guys, 7 o'clock. I'm hopefully it gets here before 8, but not Kathleen. She was everybody at the table, we're all having family dinner. We're all going to talk about our day. Sounds really nice, Kathleen. I don't know how people do it, but I know it works for some. So at this time, Michael's money, with these book deals, he got some money sometimes, but it wasn't flowing all the time. Kathleen was pretty much the breadwinner. She made, I think, about $250,000 a year, which is a good chunk of change. And Michael did write for the Herald, so I'm sure he got some money from that, but I don't know how much. I don't know if it was a full-time salary, but when he was writing for the Herald, he was blasting the local government and police force. He did not like how Durham still came off a bit racist. He thought that there was a lot of injustice in the state and in the city, and he was not afraid to talk about it. And he wrote about it in the paper. Michael also ran for mayor in 1999. At the time in 2001, he was running for city council. Like this guy, he really wanted to be the change that Durham needed. So I would say these two, they did a pretty good job at raising their kids and holding down some cool jobs. However, no one's perfect, right? So after the boys graduated from high school, they moved in also with Kathleen and Michael. So it was a pretty full house, right? You got 2 boys, 3 girls, mom and dad, or stepmom, stepdad, you know what I'm saying. And after one of Michael's sons, Clayton, moves in, he got into some trouble. Clayton, I'm talking about. He was kind of a wild child. He did not make very good decisions. And this kid actually had to go to prison for 4 years when he was only 19 years old for making a pipe bomb and putting it into the school administration building. And he was going to Duke at the time. So you would think if you got into Duke, you're pretty smarty pants. But what the hell are you doing putting a bomb in the trash can in the admin building? Well, he says that he wanted to steal the ID equipment to make fake IDs so he could, buy beers at the local gas station. I think this is crazy. I mean, making fake IDs when you're 19, maybe not crazy. I knew people that did that. I know it's a big, big no-no. It's a federal offense. You should not do it. But I think when you're 19, you're not really thinking like that. You're just thinking, how can I get into the bar or whatever you're thinking? But making a bomb is a whole nother story, and putting it in the admin building, even if it wasn't going to go off, which is what he says, is a big no-no. So he ended up taking a plea deal, which I would say is a good move in my opinion, because he could be in prison still, and he only spent 4 years. But after prison, listen, I think that prison maybe did him good. And that's what Gretchen was saying too, is because he ended up going back to college and being the valedictorian, which is so impressive. All the other kids that they had too went to college. They seemed to be doing really well. Life was very good until one fateful night of December 8th, 2001. Started off great. Mike got a call that they wanted to take one of his books and turn it into a movie, which is like amazing. Todd, the other son, not the one that went to prison, and his friend were going to a Christmas party. And then the 2 lovebirds, Kathleen and Michael, they were going to watch a movie. Michael went to Blockbuster Video. If you guys remember that, it was a place that you actually go in and you go A through Z looking on the walls to see what movie you wanted to watch for that particular night. It is a thing of the past. I remember it very well. I can't believe we don't do that anymore. It's pretty incredible, because I remember having to put in, like, when you wanted to watch like a movie that was really popular, you had to like get there early just to see if you could get one. Like, now we just download them. Okay. So they rented America's Sweethearts. They went back, they drank some wine, and late that night, early into the next morning of December 9th, the 2 decided to go grab a smoke and sit by their pool. It was a cool night, but warmer than normal. Okay. In the upper 50s. To me, probably too cold to go sit by the pool. But I mean, if you're used to 30s in December and it's like almost 60, maybe that's cool or warm. So Kathleen did smoke from time to time, and probably when she was drinking. I have friends that do this, they get their little Virginia Slims and they're puffing away thinking they're cool. I do not think it's cool to smoke. So just a public service announcement, don't do it. Just stay away, kids. Nicotine is bad. Okay, just had to say that. But Kathleen, she did it from time to time, and Michael smoked a pipe. You could see it on the Netflix documentary. The guy is like smoking a pipe all the time. I also don't really get smoking pipes, but whatever. All right. So Kathleen gets a call that night from a coworker, and she says, hey, I have to send you an email and we need to have a conference call first thing in the morning. Well, Kathleen doesn't have her computer. So she says, you know what? Send it to Michael's email. You got to remember, this is 2001. It's not like today where we've got everything on our phones, right? You still have to like get on your computer to check your email. So she says, send it to Michael's email. While the 2 are just chilling by the pool, Kathleen says, you know what? I'm going to call it a night because I have this early morning conference call now. And she makes her way inside. Michael hangs out by the pool a little bit longer, just enjoying the nice night and smoking his pipe. Do we believe that? I don't know. Like, I'm like, do you stay outside? Are you really that kind of guy that's just like, oh, lounging and like by your pool in your lounge chair? I mean, maybe if it was me, I would fall asleep. So I would be like, I'm going in with you. But maybe Michael's not like that. Maybe he meditates. So when Michael comes inside, which is who knows how much later, but it's a bit later, he finds horror. He finds Kathleen at the bottom of the stairs in a pool of blood, and she's barely breathing. He immediately calls 911.
Please,
is she conscious?
What?
Is she conscious?
No, she's not conscious.
Okay.
Please.
How many stairs did you
What?
fall down?
Huh?
How many stairs?
Stairs.
How many stairs? Calm down, sir. Calm down.
No, 15, 20, I don't know. Please, get somebody here right away, please.
Okay, somebody's dispatching the ambulance
No.
while I ask you questions.
It's in Forest Hills, okay? Please.
Okay, so it takes 8 minutes for the ambulance to arrive, which I think is too long, in my opinion. I mean, for a big city, I would think it would get there a little bit sooner, but as soon as it does arrive, so does his son, Todd, back from the party. Once they check out Kathleen, they realize that she is actually not breathing. She has died. Michael is flipping the F out. All right. He is in total shock. He's pacing back and forth. And when his son breaks the news to him that Kathleen is actually not going to make it, Michael runs and just kind of covers Kathleen's body and is crying on top of her. At this point, the police have arrived, and the amount of blood that they see in and around Kathleen's body, up the stairwell, on the walls, it looks suspicious. They immediately say, something is not right here. This does not look like your typical fall down the stairs. So they start treating this like a crime scene. The only problem is people have been everywhere. You got neighbors coming in. You've got the girlfriend. You've got Todd. You've got Michael. Everybody's in there just kind of tromping through the crime scene, if you will. I mean, I don't blame Michael or anybody, because to me, if this is an accident, that's what you would do. According to Michael in his own book called Behind the Staircase, he did not consider that the police were looking at him as a suspect or that anything was shady. But his son, on the other hand, who probably had a little bit more wits about him, was like, something's off here, Dad. You need to zip your lip. Actually, Todd had called his uncle, who was an attorney in a different state, and said, hey, Kathleen's fallen down the stairs. She's not living. The police are everywhere. I think they think Dad did it or did something. And so his uncle was like, you tell your dad, do not say a damn word. That is what an attorney will tell you, to not talk. It is a double-edged sword, right? So you have one instance, it's like, if you have nothing to hide, then spew it out. But if you have something to hide, then you are going to say, I'm not talking. However, whatever you do say, even if it is the truth, but comes off odd and you are innocent, it can be held against you. So it's smart not to say anything, but it does look very suspicious. Michael also, remember, is not a fan favorite to the police because he wrote about their corruption and incompetence. And you know what? Some of those same people that he wrote about are now the ones determining if he is a killer of his own wife. So soon after the cops get there, they call in an investigator. His name is Dwayne Deaver, to analyze the blood in the blood spatter. Supposedly this guy is like a blood spatter expert. He knows exactly how things happen, the way the blood is and where it is and how it got there. At this moment, Michael is now considered the suspect. And when I looked at the crime scene photos, I will tell you, it looks real bad. Like, I also don't know how Kathleen could have bled that much from a fall down the stairs. So they take Kathleen to an autopsy, or for an autopsy, and it was determined that Kathleen had died from bleeding out of her head. She had 7 very large lacerations to her skull, and anybody that's ever cut their head, you know it bleeds a lot. There were no skull fractures or contusions, which seemed odd since there was like these big, long kind of cuts on her scalp. They were probably like this big, and 7 of them, like kind of next to each other. Not only did she have these lacerations, but she had some bruising. She had some scrapes on her face. The medical examiner, along with the DA, had determined that Kathleen's death was from blunt force trauma by a weapon of some sort. But this weapon had to be strong enough to cause these lacerations, but not heavy enough to fracture her actual skull or cause any additional damage. Mind you, the defense will say they went through 10 years of blunt force trauma victims, and every single one of them also had skull fracture if they ended up dying from a blunt force trauma. So it is questionable if that is exactly what caused Kathleen's death. So the investigation gets underway and police start pulling evidence from the house. Well, if you've ever seen any of those crime shows, you'll know that they basically ransack your house for anything they can find, and they did not find a weapon, but they found another type of weapon, in my opinion. They found a weapon on Michael's computer. Michael had a secret. Michael was bisexual, and he kept this lust for men in the closet or in his computer or at the gym or wherever he was to get his fantasies filled. For years, Michael had sexual relations with men and often looked at gay porn. Now, let's talk about the year again. We're in 2001. We are talking about a man that was in the military who's in his 50s in North Carolina. So I don't think it's unheard of that he would keep this to himself. In his book, he claims that Kathleen did not know about this side of him. And I will also say that I do think it's a red flag when you have a cheater, pumpkin eater. We always talk about that. If somebody's cheating, I don't like it at all. I think also if you're cheating and you're innocent, I'm sorry for you because it makes you look guilty. So Michael, he doesn't say that he is cheating. And we could talk about this. We could see what you guys think. Is this considered cheating or not? Michael would often get his fantasies filled by escorts, and he would let them know that he was married, and he would also not have feelings for them. Michael, they found an email to an escort that Michael was going to meet up with. It actually never happened, but Michael says in his email that it's purely for sex. He says, I am a bisexual male that is happily married to a dynamite wife. Now, this email was months prior, but you know, they go back to all this stuff. So I have thought about it over the last few weeks after I've dug in all this stuff. I think that email says that, yes, in my opinion, yes, he's cheating on Kathleen in a way that is not okay. If my husband was doing this, I would have a fiend conniption, okay? But I also don't think that he didn't love his wife. I don't think he was going to kill his wife so that he could be with this escort that he never met. That's a different kind of murder situation that I don't think we have going on here. And by the way, I don't think Kathleen would have been down with this either because she wasn't down with her first husband having an affair, although it might have been a more emotional affair than what we have going on here. They also would find out that Michael did cheat on Kathleen with other men, not just this escort that he was emailing with over the years. He also cheated on his first wife, Patty, with men and women. With Kathleen, purely just men. In one of the documentaries, either on HBO or Netflix, I think it's the HBO one, it's a told story by actors, and some of it is not true. Some of it is just fabricated for, like a Lifetime movie type of situation. They did insinuate that Kathleen knew about this, but according to Michael in his book, she did not. So this gay porn did not sit well with the investigators, and they made it really clear to Michael by leaving a printed picture of one of the porn that they found on his computer just sitting in his house. So when he came back from the search, it was just there. And to me, it's like, they're like, F you, we know what you're up to, buddy. And it's not being, husband of the year. So now we have this porn. They have a really disturbing autopsy, and they have come to this conclusion that Kathleen must have found out about Michael's infidelity that night. Remember, she got that email on his computer. She got mad, and Michael decided to beat Kathleen with something that was not heavy enough to fracture her skull, but heavy enough to make lacerations on her head, and then push her down the stairs. I mean, it seems plausible to me, but is that what happened? Michael's entire friend and family base thought, no way, no way. Investigators interviewed everyone close to Michael, and no one could ever fathom that he would hurt Kathleen. They all said how happy they were. Actually, his sons were like, Kathleen's the first person that ever made my dad happy and playful and loving and sexual, and they were made for each other. So it seems like Patty was a great woman. Michael really respected his first wife, and still all through years up until recently, he has. So it doesn't make sense at this point that Michael would do this. So the police were like, well, shoot, we need more. We need somebody to turn on him, at least somebody in his family. And so this is when they got a hold of Kathleen's sister and said, we want you to come in. We want to show you these autopsy photos of your sister. And we also want to tell you that Michael's into dudes. And this does not sit well with Kathleen's sister, Candace. I think it wouldn't sit well with anybody. You're like, wait, what? He's doing somebody else besides my sister? They turn Candace pretty quickly. They also get Kathleen's biological daughter, Caitlin, to come in and tell her the same details. And at that point, she also turns on Michael. I honestly think the saddest part of this whole story is that Kathleen's death turned a family that, from the outside looking in, from what I know about them, which is not much, you guys, but from what I can gather, is that it looked pretty magical to have these kids from all these different kind of families, right? They all came together with one unit, and it all seemed to be going really well. And Kathleen dies, and it turns the entire family upside down. And as soon as Caitlin turns on her stepdad, Michael, well, guess what? Michael's not allowed to talk to her, not allowed to communicate with her. You have no communication past this point. I mean, I think it was a pretty sad situation. Prosecutors are convinced that Michael did it. They charged him with murder. They still don't have the murder weapon. So what the heck happened? Where is it? What is it? Well, guess what? Candace, the sister-in-law, she gets an epiphany. She's like, oh, I know exactly what did it. I bought Kathleen a Christmas present years ago when she was married to Frank, and it's called a blowpoke, which, you guys, I had never even heard about it, but it's like a long, hollow thing that you blow in for the fireplace to like get it to light, you know, instead of just like what my family, I did. It's like go up to the fire and like you're like, you know, trying to get it to light. I guess this is like a fancy tool. Well, Candace says she bought all of her siblings this lame present, in my opinion, for Christmas, and that's got to be it. Well, nobody can even think about this tool. They're like, I haven't seen that ever or anytime soon. And so, and they're like, we haven't even seen it in this house. Well, they're like, well, that's it. That is the murder weapon. I'm going to tell you, if I got a gift like that 10 years ago, I probably would had put it in the Goodwill by now. So I wouldn't have thought, like, even the investigators to be like, yeah, that's it. I don't know. I think they're stretching a little bit. Police never did find this weapon on any of their searches. You know, they did not take it from the home. Prosecution also said the couple had some debt, about $140,000 in credit card debt, which is a large chunk of money. But Michael says that part of that money was a whole car that they put onto their credit card so they could get points, which I have heard people do this before. And depending on the interest rate, sometimes you can do that with your credit card and get a better deal than if you were paying at a dealership. So that might be right. And he said they always did that and they went on some magical vacation. So I'm going to say living in this fancy house, her making all this money, maybe that's not that much money. Also, the prosecution thinks it is, and they also think that Michael's not making any money, and they also think that Michael makes a lot of money when Kathleen is not living. Kathleen was working for that job I told you about that she was doing really well in, but the company itself wasn't doing so well. They were doing a lot of layoffs, and Kathleen was worried about getting laid off. If she did get laid off, then Michael wouldn't have been able to collect all the money that he did collect after Kathy died. Michael got $300,000 or a little bit over from Kathleen's work benefits upon her death, which he ended up giving all to his legal team. You can imagine that is very pricey, and he wouldn't have got that if Kathleen had got laid off. Kathleen also had a life insurance policy from her work worth $1.4 million. Her beneficiaries, according to Michael's book, were her ex-husband and her daughter. However, there are other numerous publications, including Oxygen, that I have read that says that Kathleen, after she got married to Michael, changed it from Frank to Michael's name. But I do know that that money was actually paid out to Frank and her daughter. So why was it paid to Frank at all? I am confused about that. So I don't know who's lying here. To me, if Frank got any of the money, then Michael was right. But Frank shouldn't get anything. Caitlin should get it all. And if Frank did get a check, because that's just legally how it happened, I hope Frank gave all the money to Caitlin. Or I told you that there's a lot of blood at the scene, and some EMS personnel, the emergency medical service, they claimed that some of the blood was dried. And this made the prosecutors think that maybe Michael waited. Maybe he killed Kathleen and then waited to call. There were also 2 wine glasses on the counter, and they did not have fingerprints of Kathleen's on the glassware. So these are the things that kind of really piqued the interest of the prosecutors or the investigators. Like, why this is not making a lot of sense, right? Why aren't Kathleen's fingerprints on these glasses? I can't tell you. I can tell you that Kathleen did have a blood alcohol level of 0.07, which is almost legally drunk. Not quite, but almost. And she had also popped a Valium that night. Now, if anybody has ever done those together or knows somebody that's done them together, you can be on your ass, okay? You cannot be drunk legally. You could be a 0.07 and pop a Valium and be real loopy. So to me, I think you could fall down the stairs backwards or whatever. Because at first I was like, you don't fall down the stairs backwards. You fall down. If you're walking up the stairs, you fall down the stairs forward. If you are going down the stairs, you fall down the stairs backwards, in my opinion. But I think if you have some Valium and some wine, I don't know which way you're falling. So there were a couple other suspicious things. And one was that Kathleen had some damage to her neck bone, which she did have an accident in the pool recently. So it could have been from that, but it also could have been from Michael trying to strangle her. She also had blood on the bottom of her feet, like she stood up and then fell back down, because there's no other reason that she should have blood on the bottom of her feet. Okay, the staircase is a real mystery, but this is not the only mystery that this case comes with. Remember, I told you about the adopted daughters, the bio mom, Liz. Well, she died. Remember, back in 1985, her sister finds out about Kathleen's death and says, "This seems really weird. I am going to call the investigators to tell them about this coincidence," because Liz also was found at the bottom of a stairwell. Turns out, one night after Michael helped Liz with the kids, got them to sleep, and then took Liz to drop off her car somewhere, he says he dropped her back off at home. And then the very next morning, the nanny comes over at 7:30 a.m. and finds Liz at the bottom of the stairwell dead. The nanny is hysterical, I can imagine, and she runs over to get the Petersons, and Michael and Patty run over and they find Liz gone. Liz supposedly had some sort of medical condition, and she had been having severe headaches in the past weeks. According to Michael, he immediately says that she must have died from a hemorrhage, a cerebral hemorrhage. When they did the autopsy by the military, and actually I think they did one in Germany also, the death certificate says natural causes. Liz was 42 or 43, so I think it's young. but I also have a cousin that died very young in her sleep from a heart condition that nobody knew about. So, I mean, shit happens, right? Like this could be it, but it is a weird coincidence. And it made the prosecution think that it's very strange. And we are not really sure if this military autopsy is correct. So they decided to exhume Liz's body, which they did. I don't really have a problem with that because I also am like, what in the world? How do two people die at the bottom of the staircase in your life? That is odd. Well, I do have a problem with this. They wanted to bring the body all the way from Texas, that's where Liz was buried, to North Carolina to have the same person autopsy Liz as autopsied Kathleen. I don't think that's necessary. I think it's necessary to have the independent decide what happened, but that is not what happened. So I think there's a conflict of interest there, and they ended up ruling Liz's death a homicide. This doesn't also mean that Michael is the one that killed her, right? I mean, we know that Michael was there that night, but maybe somebody else came in. Maybe Liz fell down the stairs herself. We don't know, but this does not look good for Michael whatsoever. So I think about it like this, like, why would Michael want Liz dead? Maybe her two kids come with some military benefits that Michael could use, but kids are really expensive. Trust me, he put those girls through college. Like, that's going to be more money than the military is going to give you over, I don't know, some years because you took one of their people's children. I just can't imagine that it's a lot of money. I also thought that maybe he had an affair with Liz, but Patty says no way. She does not believe so. The prosecution thought that maybe the girls were Michael's biological kids, so they ended up doing a DNA test, and turns out they weren't. So maybe it's a weird coincidence. Maybe it's not, but like I said, it doesn't look good. Another thing that doesn't look good for Michael was the fact that in his book, or his books that he wrote about Vietnam, he claimed to be injured in the war and have a Purple Heart. Well, like I told you, he was injured in the military, but it was in a car accident. It was not when he was in Vietnam, and he does not have a Purple Heart. This made Michael look like a liar, liar, pants on fire. Let's learn, like Scott Peterson, Michael Peterson, you cannot lie. Lying is bad. If you start lying about whatever, it doesn't look good later on, right? Like, your character is in play here. And if you have bad character from cheating and lying, you're not scoring any points with the prosecution at all. And you're not scoring any points with the jury, I promise you. So Michael's trial took forever, like months. This jury had to sit there and listen to the trial. And in the middle of the trial, you'll never guess, they found that damn blowpoke. Michael's son ended up finding it in the basement, like full of cobwebs. And it turns out it wasn't actually the murder weapon. It had no signs of damage to it, had no dents, no blood. It just was like, it's one of those things that you really don't actually use. So it was put away, but she didn't want to probably like throw it away because it was her sister's and she had some sentimental attachment to it. We all have shit like that. So that's not the murder weapon, but it didn't really matter because they already had told the jury that it was basically, or something like it, something similar to a blowpoke. After months of listening to what could have happened to Kathleen and some demoralizing behaviors of Michael was found guilty of murder. The jury went back and deliberated for 14 hours. Michael thought he had it in the bag. You guys, I never think you have it in the bag. I think that when you are up for a conviction of murder, you are already looked at as guilty, unfortunately, right? We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Well, beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, it is what it is. When a jury of your peers walks in and sees you sitting there as a defendant, they already think you're there for a reason. And the reason is that you must be guilty. My opinion. Yes, I think some people get off, talk about Casey Anthony. I mean, mind blown. I don't know how it happens. OJ, all these people that probably did commit these crimes get off. And then you have people that are in jail that shouldn't be in jail. To me, I don't know if Michael Peterson should have been convicted or not. It's a weird case, right? But I do think if there was anything that sent people along the way to think Michael Peterson was guilty, they were going to find him guilty because they already have a prejudice just walking in there. So after his conviction, let's talk about that. They sent a lot of appeals. He lost them all. And then Michael's neighbor comes forward, Larry Pollard, who also was an attorney. He has a theory, and you guys, I know you all have heard about this theory, but I'm kind of into it. Okay, Larry spends countless hours reading over evidence on this case. Larry also is kind of like this intuitive nature guy, and this is true. They found these microscopic feathers in Kathleen's hair. She also had her own hair clutched in her hands, like 30 hairs, okay? Clutched in her hand on one and 25 in the other. Inside these clutched hands were also feathers. Her hair also had blood on it. So why would she have her own hair clutched in her hand? That's suspicious. There was also some tree bark or some pine needles that examiners found during her autopsy. So Larry thought that maybe Kathleen brought out some Christmas decorations, which she was going to do the day after, but maybe she wanted to get a head start. And when she went out to the front door, a barred owl swooped down, thinking Kathleen was some sort of food, grabbed her head with its talons, and flew off. There were a couple drops of blood outside in the front, and there was also a smear of Kathleen's blood near the front door. And those things were never really accounted for. Like, why was her blood there? He thinks from there she ran inside, wanted to go upstairs to get maybe a towel or figure out what the hell just happened, and she fainted at the bottom of the stairs. From there, she must have came to, got up again, and went back down. She had already lost a lot of blood. It seems crazy, right? But it turns out that these damn owls do attack people. It happened only 20 miles away from the Petersons' home. Also, let me tell you, my brother-in-law was attacked in the head by some crazy ass bird walking his dog and had a big gash in his head too. And this was a little bird, you guys, like a freaking baby bird. Wasn't baby, but like it looked like a tiny bird. So a big ass owl coming down and grabbing your head. I think it's a possibility. They did look at these feathers and they are owl talon feathers. So Larry filed a motion to input a new theory, but the judge was not buying it. He's like, okay, your owl theory, like really? So that lead went nowhere. But then in 2011, remember I told you about the blood spatter evidence guy who supposedly had all this knowledge, Dwayne Deaver. Turns out that this guy, after 25 years in his field, falsified evidence and himself was a liar, pants on fire, and he was corrupt. So it turns out that Michael was right about all the shit he was writing about this like corruption, and it was exposed. And guess what? Dwayne was fired. I have to just put a disclaimer too. That book that Diane Fanning wrote, she does thank Dwayne Deaver for all of his contributions to her book, which I'm sure was written before he basically like got told that he was falsifying documents. So who knows what she took from him in her whole book. So I did have to like think about that it's a little bit one-sided. But The Staircase on Netflix, also one-sided, right? You just see all of the defense side. So I take caution when I write these stories. I look at both sides. So Dwayne, he was a big deal in convicting Michael. He was up there testifying against him, like showing how it all happened. And so Michael's lawyers ended up appealing because of this. And another fact was the blowpoke. They ended up finding a photo from the crime scene that they did take a picture of the blowpoke and they never, ever presented it to the defense. So shady business going on in Durham. So in 2011, Michael was granted a new trial, and that is great news for Michael. But he could also see the writing on the wall. It was a real possibility that this dude was going to go back to prison. A jury could find him guilty again. So in 2017, Michael ended up taking an Alfred plea, which is basically you're pleading guilty without ever saying you're guilty. You can say that the prosecution has enough evidence against you to convict you, but that you maintain your innocence. He says he'll never say that he was guilty because he isn't. His Alfred plea was given for manslaughter or for voluntary manslaughter, and he was given 7 years. He had already spent 8 years in prison, so Michael Peterson is a free man. He is a convicted felon, and he's written 2 books, but those 2 books, because he's a convicted felon, no profits go to him for that. They will go to charity, or they will go to Caitlin, who has sued Michael in a civil suit, and she did win over $25 million. So he owes her a lot of money. Michael did also have a girlfriend for 13 years. She was a producer on that Netflix documentary. I guess she fell in love with him. But once he was out of prison and she wanted him to move to France to be with her, he was like, I can't do it. I have grandkids now. I've got all this stuff going on here, and I really want to be with my family. So he ended up living, you guys, with Patty, his first wife, up until Patty unfortunately died of a heart attack in 2021. Once that Netflix documentary came out in 2018, they kind of went dark, which is probably a good thing because they filmed that documentary so long ago. They probably had no idea that that would ever be sold to Netflix or ever be a big thing. And so I couldn't really find the girls or Clayton. I do know Clayton did marry his girlfriend that he had back then and has children. As for Todd, I did find some crazy YouTube video that he made saying that he thought his father was a serial killer, and he thought that he killed Kathleen and Liz and his mom, Patty. He also claims that his father tried to take him away from his sobriety. This rant to me felt like he kind of had fallen off the wagon at the time. And I think he tried to pull that video, but I mean, once you put anything online, you guys, you can't take it off. So somebody always finds it. So I don't know what happened there. I will tell you, Clayton is probably the favorite son now after Todd made that video. Caitlin, she does look like she's been married, or she is married, but I don't have much on that. Also, I wanted to tell you about our listener, Tina, who graciously let us know about Michael Peterson. That's how I came to do this case. She sent me some screenshots of some text messages that she had with him about the Murdaugh murders. Okay. She had reached out to him because she wanted a book sign that she read from him, and he graciously did it for her. And then she said, hey, what do you think about Murdaugh? And he says that he thinks that he's a guilty dude, and lots more to come on all that guilt going on in that family. She asked about Scott Peterson, no relation, by the way. And he said, yes, I too believe that Scott Peterson is the killer of his wife. Why? Who else would want to throw that pregnant lady in the bay? And Gretchen will have an argument for you there, but I agree, Michael. Scott Peterson, to me, is guilty as charged. Also, a liar and a cheater, pumpkin eater. Doesn't sit well. Oh, and Michael now, he lives on his own in Durham. He's almost 80, if not 80 now. So that's the story. You guys tell me what you think. Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's innocent? How the heck did this happen? Was it an owl? I really would like to know, right? I'm kind of going with the owl theory. I think if he didn't do it, then it's definitely the owl, and I am leaning towards the owl. His defense attorney also is leaning towards the owl, but I mean, go figure. So if you have not listened to our podcast, go to Housewives of True Crime. Please leave us a review. Please follow us here if you haven't yet, and please comment on our page. Thank you.